Just imagine, you once loved someone with all your sincerity. You used to send her morning greetings, used to miss her so much at night, it made your chest tighten. But then one day, she pulled away, not with a breakup, but with silence, no explanation, no anger, just an empty space, colder than rejection. You check your phone every minute, reread old messages like you're searching for a clue to understand. She's still posting photos, still smiling, still living happily, but for you, it's a dark tunnel with no end, and in that silence, you no longer know who you are. If you've ever fallen into that feeling, the feeling of being drained by someone who didn't need to say a single word, then this video is for you, not to get revenge, not to make her come back, but so you'll never have to bow your head to silence again, because maybe you've forgotten you weren't born to beg for attention. You're not someone who stands in the background, waiting for someone else to feel generous enough to return. You are who you are, and if someone doesn't see that value, what you need to do isn't try harder, it's to step out of the game. On this journey, I won't teach you how to text her so she'll reply. I'll show you how to respond to yourself, with a kind of strength no one can ever control again. This is the Stoic philosophy in love. Don't try to control others, just control yourself. If you're brave enough to face the wound, then be still, because from this moment on, you're no longer the man who was left behind. There's a true story, cold and silent, like the land where it happened. The story of a young soldier, someone who once believed that love would be the warmest refuge in life. They said it was just a mountain hike through northern Europe during storm season, but for him, it was the final journey of an old version of himself. He and the woman he loved began the journey together. At first, they laughed, held hands, thinking that as long as they were together, even ice and snow wouldn't be scary. But nature doesn't cater to feelings. When the white storm rolled in, winds howled and tore down ancient trees, and the world turned into a blur of white. The cold cut into the skin like razor blades. The sensation on his face almost disappeared. In the chaos, she panicked, shivering, eyes full of blame. She held him responsible for bringing her here, for not being prepared, for not having a way out. And then, in a decision made from instinctive fear, she turned and ran. No goodbye, no looking back. She ran down the mountain, convinced she'd find safety below, where there was no snow, where she wouldn't have to endure. He stood there, didn't call out, didn't chase, didn't blame. He knew that if he ran after her in panic, they would both die. Instead of letting loneliness consume him, he set up camp in the silent cold. He gathered the damp branches still left and lit a small fire in the white wilderness. The wind howled through the tent, but the fire kept burning, faint but steady. He sat there, alone, not because he didn't need anyone, but because he understood, in moments of survival, the only one who can save you is you. He was gone. He left behind nothing but calm, and a wordless lesson. Calm doesn't make you lonely. It keeps you alive. And sometimes, surviving like that takes you somewhere others can no longer reach. We keep thinking that those who don't hold on to us never loved us. But the truth is, some people love deeply enough to know that emotions should never be an excuse for panic. Not everyone who leaves is giving up, and not everyone who stays is worth holding on to. That man didn't vanish. He simply learned not to let emotions guide him into the storm, and that is what carried him through. Not her, not love, but silence, like a small flame, quietly burning through life's sharpest winds. 1. She's not silent because she stopped loving you. There are no snowstorms in today's world, But there is another kind of storm, quieter yet just as intense, an emotional storm. It doesn't soak your skin or freeze your body, but it leaves you so overwhelmed you can barely breathe. She didn't walk away, but she's not really here either. She never said goodbye, but she doesn't ask how you're doing anymore. She just went silent. But don't get it twisted. That silence isn't the end. It's a test, a psychological strategy, a quiet mirror placed in front of you to see how you react without direction, without any message to hold on to. It's not the end. It's a trap. She's waiting for your reaction, waiting for you to rush in with a message. How are you? Is something wrong? I miss you. And if you respond too fast, if you come running like a gust of desperation, you've just confirmed you still have control over my emotions, like a cat pulling away to see if you'll chase. If you run after her, you're no longer in control. You're the prey. A woman's psychology can sometimes run on paradox. She doesn't need you to suffer, but she wants to know if you can live without her, and if you can't, you lose your appeal. Because deep down, a man who can't hold his ground in silence will never be strong enough to be a steady anchor. What makes you valuable isn't whether you message her sooner or later. It's whether you stay calm when your emotions are pushed to the edge. Her silence doesn't ruin you. Your rushed reaction is what makes you lose your worth. You think you're acting out of love, but really, you're acting out of fear of loss. And fear has a scent, one that makes people turn away. So when she goes silent, learn from the man on the snowy peak. No shouting, no blaming, no explaining. Just stay still, look inward, build a new fire, one made of calm, of focus on your own growth. A fire bright enough that anyone who once left has to glance back. She might come back, she might not. But what matters is, you didn't lose yourself in someone else's emotional storm. And the most important thing isn't that you stayed silent, it's how you stayed silent. Not the kind of silence that's bitter or punishing, not the fake silence that's just waiting for a signal to jump back into the same old cycle, but the silence of someone who understands real value doesn't need to prove itself in a rush. You don't react because you know reacting is what someone does when they need to be guided, but you don't. You're no longer sitting there waiting for permission from anyone. Imagine how she feels right now. Silence, the move she's used to playing, suddenly backfires. She created space, but this time it's not being filled. She dropped signs, but no one is catching them. The stories she posts, once bait, now float into the void. Each day that passes, what she used to control slowly becomes the thing that makes her uneasy. And your silence, the longer and steadier it is, becomes a mirror she has to look into. No one left to blame, no one left to expect comfort from. She starts to hear her own echo. And that's what most people fear most, facing themselves. You've done what most men can't do. You didn't react when tested. You didn't need to prove who was right. You didn't need to show who hurt more. You simply stayed there, a man with a straight spine, a warm heart, and clear eyes. She might return, she might not, but by holding that calm, you've stepped into a different version of yourself, one where no matter who leaves, you remain whole, a man who doesn't live to please fleeting emotions, but lives to hold on to his own strength. And as that silence stretches on, something strange starts to stir inside her. Not anger, not pain, but confusion. Confusion because for the first time, she can't read you. She can't guess your emotions. She can't control the narrative. She starts to question herself. Did I just let go of something real? The more she hears nothing from you, the more her mind starts spinning. Every silent space you leave behind becomes a dark room where her imagination starts screaming louder than reality. She pictures you doing fine, maybe laughing with someone else, maybe really moving on. She checks online for clues, a like, a status, a song you shared, anything that might hint you still care, but everything's too clean, too quiet. You leave behind nothing but your absence, and sometimes that speaks the loudest. Deep down, she starts asking herself, I went silent, but he didn't react. So, was I really as important as I thought I was? And the moment that question echoes, the balance of power completely shifts. And you did nothing. But in truth, you did the most important thing. You held on to yourself. And sometimes, what makes someone unable to forget you isn't that you chased them, but that you were strong enough not to. When you don't react, the power dynamic reverses. Your silence becomes a space that can't be defined, not rejection, not chasing, not conflict. But because of that, she can no longer find her place in the story. A woman can face anger, she can withstand coldness, but what unsettles her is standing in front of a man who says nothing. And that's when the quiet shift in power begins. You're no longer the one running after her emotions. She's the one turning circles in her mind, caught in countless imagined scenarios about you. She still posts stories, still drops those familiar signals, but this time, no one responds. And when the replies vanish, every move becomes a question she throws into the void. No rejection, no tears. You're simply there, quietly present, like a mirror reflecting back the emotions of someone who once had full control. For the first time, she has to face herself without you as the reference point. And when silence stops being her strategy and becomes your natural state, everything she thought she had control over loses its meaning. You did nothing, and yet everything changed. Not because your silence was punishment, but because you no longer needed anything from her presence. There's no resentment, no bitterness. You're just no longer the man waiting for a signal to return. That silence isn't cold. It's light. The light of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Someone who knows exactly who he is and no longer lets other people's emotions redraw his boundaries. You've gone from being the one tested to being the one who makes others question themselves. And in this new power dynamic, the truly strong never need to raise their voice. 3. She's afraid, but keeps a composed facade. And then, when your silence is no longer a sudden reaction, but becomes a deliberate way of living, what happens on the other side? She, who once stood at the center of all your emotions, who was used to you being the one to make amends, who believed that silence would always make you come rushing back, is now faced with something she was never taught to handle, an absence she can't control, a void that gives off no signals, no blame, no demands, no need for explanation. At first, she keeps up appearances like nothing ever happened. The glowing photos, the hangouts with friends, the regular quotes about self-love fill her social feed. Everything seems staged to send one message: I'm fine, I don't need you. But behind that polished curtain, quiet questions begin to rise, more clearly each day without you on the other end to respond. Has he really forgotten me? Is he seeing someone else? Am I no longer important to him? And what terrifies her isn't that you've vanished from her life. It's that she can't be sure of anything anymore. She can't read where your mind is, can't tell who your heart is with. She's lost her ability to steer the situation. In a world where people can see each other with a single tap, total silence, intentional disappearance, is what confuses people most. because what we fear most is what we can't predict. And you, with your calm, have become an unknown. No stories, no new posts, no reaction to any of the signals she puts out. You're not avoiding her, nor trying hard to seem cold. You're just simply no longer there the way you once were. A once familiar presence has now become a silent absence, and that absence is what begins to turn her mind inward. Before, every time she walked away, it was to create a safe distance, to make you panic and chase. But this time, when you don't react, that distance starts to shrink into worry. She's no longer sure who she is in your world, can't read your emotions, doesn't know what's happening behind the stillness. As each day passes, with no response, she begins doing what only you used to do, watching, searching for traces, rereading old messages, staring at old photos with you in them, not out of longing, but out of fear, the growing fear in her mind that you've truly stepped out of her control. And what makes that fear even heavier is that you didn't try to make it happen. You didn't punish her. You didn't go silent to get back at her. You simply returned to yourself, living your life peacefully, steadily, quietly. And that steadiness now feels to her like a distance she can no longer cross. You've pulled back the energy you once gave freely, and now that she can't access that energy anymore, she realizes some people don't wait, don't cling, don't speak bitter words. They just quietly step back and let silence answer everything. And for someone who was used to controlling other people's emotions, losing that ability can sometimes be the most devastating blow of all. 4. She comes back, but not for love, just to check. There are returns that aren't about love, but about testing whether they still have control over you. And when she sends a short, cold, seemingly harmless message like, "Hey, how have you been lately?" Don't be so quick to think it means she misses you. It's not a genuine check-in. It doesn't come from a sleepless night or a breeze stirring up old memories. It's a probe, subtle, but calculated. She doesn't need you to reply with warmth. She just needs a reaction. And if you answer immediately, if your heart speaks before your mind steps in, she'll register it instantly. He's still here, still waiting, still predictable, still under my influence. That confirmation is enough for her. No need to continue the conversation, no need to explore any emotions. She'll disappear again, not because she hates you, but because she knows you haven't moved from where she left you. She didn't come back to rebuild anything. She came back to check. Is the door still open? Does the invisible thread she once held still work? One woman once admitted it bluntly. As long as he replies, "I'll feel reassured, then I'll vanish again." And you see, some people don't want to go deep. They just want to know you're still not standing up yet, so they can keep walking away with ease. So when that message comes, you might feel your heart twitch, partly because you once loved her, partly because you were once used to responding, to explaining, to holding on. But today, you're different. Today, you don't react on impulse. You read the message, then put your phone down. Silence is no longer sulking. Silence now is a kind of freedom. A man who has stepped outside of someone's emotional grip doesn't need to clarify, doesn't need to explain, because the clarity is already in the lack of response. You no longer live in a world where every signal from her can pull you back. And when you don't reply, something interesting happens. For the first time, she gets no answer, no reassurance, no explanation, no affirmation that you're still the same. The absence of a response sends her mind spiraling into uncertainty, the very thing people fear the most. She might send another message, maybe a photo, a song, a throwback memory, But this time, you're no longer easily swayed, because you now understand. Anyone who comes back just to test you isn't ready to be real with you. You're not silent to get revenge. You're silent to protect the strength you've just rebuilt. She may come back, or she may not, but by not replying, you're saying something important without saying a word. I'm not the same man anymore. And that's when she begins to feel something she never expected. She's starting to lose what she once thought was always in her grasp. 5. When she starts doubting herself. But this is where things begin to diverge. There are two kinds of men in this situation, the reactive and the reflective. The first is the weak kind, the kind who feels the urge to check messages, to win her back, to do something to restore the connection. They believe that if they explain themselves well enough, text sweetly enough, lower themselves long enough, then love will return. But love isn't something you pour into a glass and measure. The more you try to fill it, the more it overflows and slips away. The strong man, on the other hand, doesn't play those games. He doesn't cling blindly to reasons to stay, doesn't need a reaction to feel validated, doesn't chase after emotion just because the other person created a gap. That man understands something deeper. Not everything that stirs your heart is meant to be held onto, and not everyone who comes back is meant to stay. That's what Stoicism teaches, not to live coldly, but to live with order in the soul. In the wisdom of ancient philosophers, emotion is the guest, reason is the host. If you let the guest run the house, everything falls apart. But if you keep your place as the host, you don't have to kick anyone out, and you don't need to beg anyone to stay. The strong man doesn't resist, doesn't resent. He just stands, like a mountain in a storm. He doesn't need to win the argument, doesn't need to prove he's right, because what he seeks is freedom. Freedom from expectation, freedom from needing to be someone in someone else's eyes, freedom to be himself, loved or not. And when she tries to come back, tries to guess his feelings, tries to play the same old cards, his silence becomes something she can't explain. No reaction, no reply, no blame. She feels off balance, not because he did something, but because he did nothing. The silence of a strong man doesn't carry anger. It's the gentle release of someone who's realized controlling others is impossible, but controlling yourself, that's real power. So don't try to win the emotional game. The more you throw yourself into it, the more you become a pawn on a board she's setting up. Step away, not out of pride, but out of peace. You don't need to act like a strong man to impress anyone. You just need to live in alignment with your own inner depth. Because in the end, any woman will feel the difference between someone pretending to be detached and someone who has truly stepped beyond the grip of emotion. And when you reach that place, you don't just leave the game, you become the one who rewrites the rules, quietly, steadily, with weight, like someone who no longer needs to win, because he's no longer even playing. 6. Emotional detachment, the turning point to becoming unmovable. There is a particular moment in a man's journey when he no longer asks, "Does she still love me?" It's not because he no longer loves. It's not because his heart has gone cold. It's because he has crossed into another threshold where his sense of worth is no longer hanging on someone else's reaction. Detachment here is not indifference. It's a higher form of awareness. It's when you still feel the stirrings, but you're no longer swept away like a leaf in the wind. You realize that love doesn't have to come with insecurity. That caring doesn't have to mean losing yourself. When you no longer depend on the other person's signals to know where you stand, You stop getting pulled into emotional spirals. You don't stay up all night just because someone didn't text back. You don't question yourself because of a glance that lacks warmth. You know who you are, and you stay there, calmly. Seneca once wrote, "The most miserable person is the one who thinks they need something outside of themselves to feel whole." How many times in your life have you believed, if she loves me, then I have worth. If she comes back, then I'll feel whole. If she approves of me, then I'm enough. But Stoicism doesn't teach you to shut down. It teaches you to let go of what's beyond your control and to come back to the only thing you can truly master, yourself. Emotional detachment is not the absence of emotion. It's loving without clinging, missing without needing, hoping without trading your dignity for someone's presence. It's when you truly understand that love isn't possession. It's allowing the other person to be free and still choosing to love them within the limits of your own self-respect. You've been the one on the waiting end, waiting for messages, hoping for a like, watching for a softer glance, and you know how draining that is. It doesn't make your love deeper. It wears you out, because love starts to feel like a test you always have to pass. But then, one day, you stop, not because you've given up, but because you've realized your value doesn't lie in someone else's hands. You don't need anyone to confirm that you're worthy of love. You love yourself enough not to let anyone hold the power to hurt you. And that moment, when you're still enough not to need a reply, clear enough not to be shaken, strong enough to stay gentle, is when you become someone who can no longer be controlled. No silent treatment makes you uneasy. No cold remark throws you off. You step out of the game, not because you've won, but because you no longer need it. Emotional detachment is a form of wisdom. It doesn't make you less warm. It makes your warmth more valuable, because you only offer it to those who truly deserve it. And in a world full of silent mind games, where people test each other with distance, silence, and detachment, calm, self-possession, and emotional sovereignty are what make you stand out, draw others in, and ultimately make you impossible to replace. 7. When she wants to come back, but you're on another level. There's a strange paradox in love. You think that if you stop trying, if you stop holding on, you'll lose her forever. But the miracle often happens in reverse. When you stop chasing, you don't lose her. You find yourself again, not right away, not overnight, but through long, quiet nights, through questions that were never answered, through the moments you almost sent a message but didn't, through each heartbeat where you learned how to calm down, how to observe your emotions instead of reacting to them. You no longer keep your eyes glued to your phone, no longer wait on the stories she posts or the status updates she shares, no longer live in a state of waiting for someone to validate your worth. And then one day, very naturally, you look at yourself and realize you've changed. You've become the man you once wished you could be, composed, clear-minded, grounded, a man who doesn't need validation to feel whole, a man who doesn't need someone to come back just to believe he's worthy of love. You're not cold, you're not rigid, you've simply stepped out of that old emotional layer, the one where everything revolved around someone who was never certain they'd stay. Then one day, she comes back, maybe through a message, a like, a vague check-in, and you're no longer quick to respond, not because you're playing games, but because you know you're no longer there. You've moved up to a different level, a place where you live from peace, not from lack, a place where you choose who to walk with, not beg anyone to stay. She can feel it, not from anything you say, but from the energy you carry, From the calm in your eyes, from the absence of urgency in your tone, from the space between you that isn't bitter, just steady, the distance of someone who no longer needs her to feel complete. Seneca once said, "A happy man is one who lives in harmony with himself," and that's you now. No revenge, no need to prove anything. You're not silent to hurt her. You're simply no longer somewhere she can reach. This isn't victory, it's growth. Because in the end, you're not the one waiting for someone to return. You're the one who has returned to yourself, more whole, more powerful, and no longer defined by the emotional storms of someone else. And after all that's been shared, if you're still here, quietly listening through to these final moments, then I believe you're not just watching a video, you're finding your way home, back to yourself. The entire journey you've just been through, from her silent, calculated distance, to the emotional storm you had to weather, to that moment you chose stillness over reaction, isn't just your story. It's the story of many men who once loved with their whole heart, only to find themselves caught in an emotional game they never understood the rules to. And now, you know, not everyone who walks away is a loss. Not everyone who returns is worth welcoming back. And you don't need to be held onto to know you have value. So take a moment, breathe deeply, and ask yourself, am I living by someone else's emotions or by my own principles? If you've ever loved, ever hurt, ever been manipulated, then this is the moment you stop being the victim. Drop a comment below. I am someone who cannot be controlled. It's more than a statement. It's a declaration for the path you are now choosing to walk again. If this video resonated with you, hit like, share, and subscribe, because there are still many powerful messages ahead waiting for you.